Air India is concerned. India's aviation watchdog found 51 safety lapses at Air India in its July audit, including lack of adequate training for some pilots, use of unapproved simulators and a poor rostering system, according to the reports. The annual audit,
after decades of being regarded as a floundering drain on the Indian taxpayer with a reputation for shabby services and disheveled aircraft, a corporate takeover pledged to turn Air India into a world-class global airline with an Indian heart that would outgrow all its domestic and international competitors. Yet, after tragedy struck on 12 June, the airline is instead facing critical questions about its ability to operate safely, throwing its long-term ambitions into jeopardy. Well, that's Air India's backstory in a nutshell, according to The Guardian.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We have given them many warnings. Have a look at that headline. In the weeks after the crash, Air India's faced growing scrutiny after the attention has turned to its own recent alleged checkered safety record. Last week, the Indian government began holding direct meetings with senior Air India management, calling for better oversight on safety and engineering. According to the article, it came as India's aviation watchdog issued 4 show cause notices to the airline just last week, citing 29 safety-related violations over the past year. These breaches included lapses in crew duty norms, fatigue management, and training oversight. They were based on disclosures made by the airline itself. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the safety violations don't have so much to do with the aircraft or to do with technical or mechanical aspects, but human aspects. Look at those words, and we really want to circle them and blow them up. Fatigue management, training oversight, crew duty norms. Where oh where in all of that is glitch monitoring or bug fixing? I remember one of the first responses to this disaster was to say that both pilots had been well rested. Well, what do you think about that now? What do you think they, especially the captain, would say? Well, before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the many of you who have subscribed. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, if you're finding the analysis of this entire case on point, accurate, intelligent, useful, please do hit the thanks button. And let's get started. So going back to The Guardian, quote, despite repeated warnings and earlier enforcement measures, systemic problems in compliance monitoring, crew scheduling, and training oversight remain unresolved, stated one notice. I think the words that really stand out to me there are systemic problems. The aviation watchdog warned the airline that continued non-compliance could leave them facing heavy financial penalties or even the removal of senior executives. It also emerged that in the days after Air India 171 crashed, more than 100 Air India pilots went on medical leave, leading to questions over the company's handling of the welfare and morale of its pilots. Please put up your hands, those of you out there who feel that this is a non-issue, who feel that no, we should blame Boeing and all of this is due to mechanical errors. Please put up your hand if you're one of those people campaigning on that score. So are you still saying that the crash had nothing to do with the welfare of the pilots, nothing to do with the morale of its pilots? One senior Indian government official with direct knowledge of the notices told Reuters the administration was concerned that, quote, Air India is taking things for granted, adding, we have given them many warnings. Air India acknowledged receipt of the notices. We remain committed to the safety of our crew and passengers, they said in a statement. So all of this really is Air India's recent history, right? Well, the formative history is also important. And just as the childhood, upbringing, and youth of a person is important to their identity, well, in true crime, to a criminal's true identity, well, the formative period of a company is also important. How much do you know about that? Well, as it turns out, Air India has plenty of issues in who it used to be and what it was, and in a sense still trying to become. Now have a look at this section from the same article subtitled An Absolute Shambles. In late 2021, when one of India's largest conglomerates, the Tata Group, which founded the airline back in 1932, agreed to pay about $2 billion to buy back Air India from the government, well, they pledged to restore it to their former glory. That was just 4 years ago, and obviously COVID occurred in that intervening period. For decades, the legacy Indian airline had languished under state ownership. Look at those words. We're talking about systemic problems. Well, languished under state ownership for years, and they were overturning years of neglect, and underfunding was seen as a gargantuan task. Well, it would be, wouldn't it? At the time of the takeover, its newly appointed CEO, Campbell Wilson, said the airline was in an absolute shambles. But Tata immediately began to make major moves to invest in, to modernize and expand Air India's fleet. So really what you're talking about is a whole bunch of new aircraft. And what, are you going to train new pilots, or are you going to use the same staff and just spread them thinly across all of these planes? Billions of dollars worth of new planes were ordered, and it became a multi-million-dollar refit of some of its older planes. A merger was also announced with an emerging successful airline, Vistara. So its corporate journey has been a long, hard slog, and only recently has the airline shown signs, a couple of signs, that its losses were narrowing. Now, since I've got a degree in economics, I know something about the subject, but you don't need a degree to understand the company was struggling a lot financially. And guess how the corporate heads were trying to solve the issues, causing the goose to be unprofitable? By cutting corners, and it appears possibly even with the pilots. I think the bottom line here is stress, financial stress. Do you think that fed into the employees of this company? Well, who were the employees? The pilots. Who are the employees of an airline company? Pilots. And look at this headline from the Financial Times. Singapore Airlines hit by losses at Air India. This came out in the last day or so. Singaporean carrier's first quarter net profit plunges almost 60%. And Singapore Airlines just has a stake in Air India. So do you see, because the company is under severe strain, the pilots are under strain. That strain is made worse by competitors who are doing better than they are, and the competition in India is particularly rife. According to the Financial Times, losses from associate companies, notably from Air India's financial results, were 122 million Singapore dollars for the 3 months to the end of June, the first quarter of its financial year. Singapore Airlines acquired a 25% stake in Air India last year, while Tata had bought Air India out of state ownership in 2022. But Tata has struggled in its efforts to revamp the flag carrier, which even before the crash had been continually criticized by passengers for poor service and aging craft. The article goes on to note that the airline faces aggressive competition at home from the now dominant carrier Indigo. Also, is it a coincidence that in the same month Air India published its financial results for the first time? Well, that's when this disaster happened, in the same month. One can imagine those at the head of the table thumping their fists and demanding that everyone perform better, that everyone try harder, and who likely bore the brunt of this pressure? Well, wasn't it the pilots? Hence, 112 Air India pilots took sick leave 4 days after the incident. Not 112 pilots from various airlines, just this one airline. You can also see why someone would want to keep this quiet. If the public knew the dire straits the airline was in, it would likely complicate their efforts to become profitable even more. Yet even in spite of these efforts at controlling the narrative, the Flight 171 crash has already proved to be damaging in terms of their reputation, in terms of, I think, the financial aspect as well. The Guardian goes on to note, while the cause of the crash in June is yet to be confirmed, it has already proved damaging for Air India and Tata, shaking consumer confidence and shining a light on a series of operational challenges and mishaps involving their aircraft. And I've always said, isn't this particular incident an important one it's important to use it to shine a light and to perhaps deal with all of these problems. And it seems I've gotten a lot of pushback where people say, no, don't shine a light, don't think about it, don't talk about it, wait till the final report comes out. If you did wait till the final report came out, what about all of these things that need to be sorted out, all of these problems that need to be sorted out? According to the article, over the past 6 months, Air India received 13 notices for multiple safety violations and incidents. Recent incidents included a fire in the power unit of an Airbus A321 that had just landed from Hong Kong to Delhi, a Kochi-Mumbai flight that veered off the runway and suffered damage to an engine cover, and a Delhi-Kolkata flight that was forced to abort takeoff at the last minute. And look at this paragraph. Despite the pledged upgrades, customer complaints about the standard of Air India aircraft, including disheveled and uncomfortable interiors, broken armrests, faulty entertainment systems, and frequent delays on international flights, have also continued, sometimes with significant consequences. In March this year, Air India Flight 126 from Chicago to Delhi, that's a pretty long distance, had to turn back after 10 hours when 11 out of the plane's 12 toilets became clogged. I mean, when last were you on a flight where a single toilet became clogged, let alone 11 out of 12? Meanwhile, in June last year, hundreds of cabin crew working for Air India went on strike over working conditions. The budget airline is also now under investigation by the EU's aviation agency after reports it did not change the engine parts of an Airbus A320 in a timely manner. So do you see, the formative history is also important, and in this case valid, but equally, it isn't the only area we need to investigate. In the very recent history, what we find is simply a pattern that shows disaster was all but inevitable. What we're seeing is what appears to be neglect or just not knowing about a lot of problems, just as we saw in the Rust incident and the Titan submersible. And what do we always say on this channel? An accident isn't an accident if it's an accident waiting to happen. An accident waiting to happen is inevitable, and an accident that's inevitable means it's predictable. And just as human beings have backstories that matter, so do entities run by human beings, in this case an airline, which is a corporate entity. Well, in effect, Air India was trying to complete a transition from a bloated, ineffective government entity, a goose of the skies, trying to change itself into a sleeker, fitter, more effective and responsive corporate kite, a corporate kite of the Air India space. Well, the fact is, like any person trying to graduate, trying to change themselves, some bad habits persist, some patterns and a particular lifestyle can be hard to shake. Changing one's skin may be easy if you're a chameleon, but to change who you are is harder, much harder, and very often not even possible, especially if those changes are fundamental. I want to finish by quoting at the end of the Guardian article, Jitendra Bhagrava, a former Air India executive. He said that most major international airlines had faced similar periods of scrutiny, and then he said, the airline has a responsibility to be open and transparent. Well, are they? Many people have commented on my coverage of Air India saying, stop speculating, stop thinking about this case. Wait for the final report and let the experts handle this. I think it ought to be clear by now that thinking about something like this is better than not thinking about it. Talking about something like this is better than not talking. Hoping and relying on transparency is risky when issues often arise precisely because of a lack of openness and transparency. In the end, bringing things into the light openly and honestly serves the greater good, and that includes your best interests, and we ought to all have an interest in that. Do you agree? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. In the next video, we're going to deal with Koberger's creepy self-assessment. We'll be looking at Brian Koberger, the Moscow, Idaho mass killer, his backstory, and how it reveals someone very unexpected and not quite the person, not quite the monster most people think he is. All right. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.